Hi everyone. Something that's been on my mind a bit and something that I feel the need to have a bit of a rant about because I haven't really talked about this much, but it's something that's been bugging me a bit, and so I just want to, talk about it. And it's the whole idea of art games and the whole conversation, argument, debate, whatever, of can games be considered art? Well, I know this is quite old now and there's been a lot going on about it, but I want to start off by just saying yes. Yes, games are art, and I know there's a lot of people who play games who agree with me, and there's people who play games that don't agree, and there's also, but I imagine people who play games would tend to agree that games are art, and I think the problem is that when we start to call something art, it's like we're trying to give it a positive spin, like we're trying to describe it in a positive way, and I don't think this is necessarily the case, because I think something doesn't have to be art to be really good, and just because something is art, that doesn't make it good. You can have several bad pieces of art, and you can have several good things that are not really artistic. Like, for example, things that are great that aren't really artistic. I mean, scientific discoveries. It's not necessarily creative, even though creativity probably helps, but it's not exactly creative. But when we come up with, like, medicines and all that sort of stuff, it's a really positive thing. I'm not trying to say that games are like that at all, and I'm not trying to say that games are like the Mona Lisa or Citizen Kane, or I'm not trying to make any of those comparisons, because I think one of the big key features of art is that you can't really compare them as easy as you can with non-artistic things. When it comes to things like scientific discoveries, you can find things that are just simply better than something before it. Like when technology advances, things that you get, the newer machines, they are just all round better, and there might be some disagreement with features in some things and compared to like previous machines, but as far as like science and technology goes, progression is always a good thing. But I think a big thing with art is that things don't necessarily have to improve, and even though it's good for things to improve, I don't think it's a necessity for things to improve, and I don't think that improving is so straightforward. I think if you have something that is artistic, that does not diminish the fact that even future things are artistic but not as good could still have some use. Just because there are some brilliant paintings out there from, well, I don't know the years, but ages ago, that doesn't mean that you can't have something these days that is appreciated. I'm sure there's many very, very simple pictures these days that are appreciated for completely different means. So I don't think it's fair to say that making something art makes it better than something else. I don't think that by describing something as art means you're saying it's better than something else. But let's move on to what I'm actually trying to say. Well, another thing that I'm trying to say. Now, a lot of the times when people try to argue that games are artistic and they are art, I think people tend to go about it the wrong way, and this is the thing that I find quite irritating. I also find it irritating when people say that games aren't, because they clearly are, and even following the rule I said from before, where things don't necessarily have to always get better, like with science and technology. Sure, like games consoles, for example, that is mostly science and technology. I mean, there's a bit of art involved there, but it's mostly science and technology, and we'd all prefer to have the latest technology with being able to do later things than weaker technology. But like with games, that doesn't necessarily apply. Games, movies, TV shows, paintings, photographs, music, all that is I think one of the big key features of what makes something art. But what I want to go into is the way that people say that games are art. usually the examples that people give when they want to try to convince someone that a game is art, they use games like Journey or Flower or Heavy Rain, and I don't think these are really good examples. I'm not saying that they're not artistic, because, well, I just don't want to make that statement, but I think it's incorrect to use those as an example, because when we try to use those types of games, another example is Okami, we are not referencing the game for what it is. We are referencing the game for specific things that it uses that people outside of the game community recognise as being artistic. I think the example for Okami is the paintbrush style. Yes, Okami does use a paintbrush style, and you can say that's artistic, but to say that the paintbrush style is the thing that makes Okami artistic is to say that the paintbrush style is, well, the game depends on that sort of style in order for it to happen, in order for it to be considered art. I don't think it's fair to do this, because if we talk about if we try to use specific examples such as Okami, and we use specific things that make them art, like the visual style, what we're essentially saying is that these games depend on these other things to make them art. We're saying that it depends on the visual style, and there'll be some games, I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but there'll be some games like, well, I suppose Sound Shapes would probably be a good example of this, where there's music is used in the game, where there's music is used as a focus point of the game, and even some like big AAA games that have like big symphonies like for the music, and on a visual style we have games like Skyrim, where it's all like an open world and you've got all the different trees and the details on the grass and whatever you want. I think this is a really bad way to go about it. It really does just say, well, this is art because it uses this other thing. And if we're saying that it's art because it uses this other thing, then we're not saying games are art. What we're saying is that some games are art because some games do arty things. And I don't think that's right. If we're going to follow that model, then there's loads of things that could be considered art that we don't. And I used the example before of games consoles, and it's the same for, like, you know, PCs and just general bits of technology. I mean, a toaster, for example. A toaster. Does it make sense to say that toasters are artistic? Not really. Why is that? Well, because there's nothing really artistic about making toast. You have a toaster, and why do you use it? You use it because you want toast. Sure, there's going to be some that paint? What am I talking about? Some of them, there will be some certain toasters that toasted in a specific area. I think I heard that there was someone made a toaster in order to try and put images of Jesus on the toast, and you can get like transparent toasters where you can see inside, I think, and you can get toasters that are all these different colours or whatever. But that's not saying that the toasterness of the object is artistic. There's not really the artistic way of making toast. All we want from a toaster is that it can make toast, and if it is artistic, then we are referring to the visual form of art. So it doesn't make sense to say that toasters are artistic in that regard, but I don't think this applies to video games. And I think a lot of the times with games, when we think about what makes us emotional when it comes to games, and I don't want to start sounding like David Cage and saying emotions all the time, because I think I'm not saying he makes bad games, but I don't like his, what's the word, not so much attitude, I don't really like his philosophy behind what makes a game emotional and all that. But when we play through games, we come across certain things that, well, you could consider them to be artistic because they invoke emotions, and I can just give you a few random examples that aren't specific. Like, say you're playing a game and you're fighting a boss, and you've been fighting this boss for 3 minutes, and you've never beaten this boss before, and then all of a sudden you're so low on health that one more hit will kill you, and the boss is on 1 health, 1 hit will kill them, and it's so close. That's artistic because it drives those emotions. Same as if you were to, like, say, level up your character and you need to decide what upgrades to get. Again, you're still thinking around how these options affect the world around you. I would consider that to be artistic. And say if you're playing a game and you're against a friend and you've never beaten them before, and then suddenly you win. Imagine the emotions you'll be going through. Those things are inherent to games. Some games do them better than others, and some games just aren't very good. But you know what? Those are just games that aren't very good. Are they still art? Of course they are. But the McDonald's logo is art. You know? It's just a different type of art. So all in all, what I'm saying is that are games art? Yes. What makes games art? Well, it's just the gaminess of the thing. We can say that there exists games that do these things well and do these things not well, but to say art games doesn't make sense because games are art by their nature. We wouldn't say what is an art painting, or ooh, this is a piece of art music. Why? Oh, this is a piece of art music because it adopts from this other type of artistic medium, or because the album cover looks good, therefore this piece of music is artistic. That doesn't make sense. So why would it make sense for games? It doesn't. So I really think that when people refer to games like Journey or Heavy Rain or Okami, as good as those games may be, and as truly artistic as those games may be when it comes to the actual artsiness of those games, I think we really do ourselves a disservice when we use those specifically as examples to try to prove that games are art. Because, like I've said before, we're not proving that the gaminess of the game aspect of it is the artistic thing. What we're saying is that, well, here are some examples that adopt from this other thing. And that's not saying that games are art. It doesn't prove that games are art. Likewise, you might have a multicoloured toaster. It doesn't make toasters a piece of art. It just means that there's a toaster that adopts visual art. And that's all I've got to say. So, I hope I've made sense in this, and I hope people agree. And just let me know what you think, and I will see you all next time.